Why does a trolley full of NHS-era pharmacy products leave your family sicker longer than the women who raised your grandparents managed on nothing but a kitchen shelf and a cold larder? The post-war pharmaceutical and convenience industries, specifically Beecham's, Boots, and the newly centralized NHS default culture, systematically replaced centuries of applied domestic remedy knowledge. It was buried by an industry, and the replacement has never worked as well. Modern ethnobotany, food science, and clinical nutrition have since confirmed what these women already knew. Salt draws out infection, steam loosens mucus faster than antihistamine, vinegar rebalances skin pH. Raw honey carries documented antimicrobial compounds. This was not superstition, it was applied biochemistry without the Latin. Every remedy in this video costs under £1. Several cost nothing at all. Some eliminate 3 or 4 pharmacy purchases outright, saving a British household upwards of £80 a year. To understand where this knowledge came from and why it was taken from you, you have to go back to the British home front of 1939, where medicine was a luxury and the kitchen was the only clinic these women had. Number 35 is where it began. The salt water gargle. 1 teaspoon of salt dissolved in half a pint of warm water, held at the back of the throat for 30 seconds, repeated 3 times daily at the first scratch of infection. Elsie Hartley, a working mother in a north of England terraced house running a household on 14 shillings a week, kept a jar of coarse salt on the shelf above the cooker, not as a seasoning but as medicine. No GP reflex, no NHS. When her daughter's throat swelled in the winter of 1939, the salt jar came down before any other thought formed. It worked. She wrote it in her notebook. Number 34, honey and lemon hot drink for throat infection and cough. A full tablespoon of raw honey dissolved in near boiling water with the juice of half a lemon, drunk slowly whilst still steaming. The antimicrobial compounds in raw honey were doing precisely what a pharmacist would later charge 6pence to attempt with something far less targeted. She wasn't being thrifty. She was being a doctor. She just didn't know that word for it yet. Number 33. The mustard poultice, applied to the chest for bronchitis and persistent winter cough. 2 tablespoons of dry mustard powder mixed with 8 tablespoons of plain flour bound with warm water into a thick paste, spread between 2 layers of cloth, laid warm across the breastbone for 20 minutes. The allyl isothiocyanate in mustard increased blood flow to the chest wall and broke up congestion faster than cold air and prayer. Elsie prepared one in 12 minutes flat. Her daughter recovered in 3 days. Number 32. The steam tent. A bowl of boiling water on the kitchen table, 2 drops of eucalyptus oil broken across the surface, a towel draped over both the bowl and the head, the face held 6 inches above the steam for 10 full minutes. For nasal congestion and sinus pressure, this was faster than any antihistamine that would later crowd the shelves at Boots. The steam did the mechanical work, the eucalyptus did the rest. Number 31. The bread poultice for drawing out splinters, boils, and early-stage skin infection. Stale bread soaked in hot milk, squeezed gently, wrapped in a clean cloth whilst still warm, pressed against the site of infection for an hour. Dorothy Fielding, a domestic science teacher in Sheffield who ran evening classes for 40 women each week through 1943, taught the bread poultice as a first-line wound response. Sugar was rationed to 8 ounces per person per week. Medicinal imports had been curtailed by wartime shipping restrictions. The kitchen was not a backup plan, it was the plan. The notebook passed between 3 houses on the same terrace. Nobody called it a medical library, it was. Number 30. Raw honey applied directly to minor cuts and burns as an antimicrobial dressing, applied generously, covered with a clean cloth, left to work overnight. The hydrogen peroxide activity of raw honey created an environment hostile to bacterial growth whilst simultaneously supporting tissue repair. The wound dressed with honey healed clean. Number 29. The cold compress for sprains and bruising. A cloth soaked in cold water, wrung firm, applied immediately, held for 20 minutes. Applied within 10 minutes of injury, it made the difference between a fortnight of limping and 3 days of tenderness. And here is where the story turns. By 1945, Vera Moss, a health visitor completing her district rounds in Birmingham, was noting something in her case files. Households maintaining an active kitchen remedy practice showed lower rates of secondary infection and shorter illness duration than those reaching for early pharmaceutical products. Not because those products failed, because the kitchen protocols were more precisely calibrated to early-stage intervention. The critical 24-hour window before a minor ailment became something requiring professional time. The irony, the NHS never admitted. The women it was designed to help had already built something that worked. Number 28. Warm olive oil, gently heated to body temperature and dripped into the ear canal for earache. 2 or 3 drops, the head tilted, held for several minutes before the ear was covered with a warm cloth. It required no prescription. It required a bottle of olive oil and a steady hand. Number 27. Bicarbonate of soda paste for bee stings and insect bites. A small amount of bicarbonate mixed with just enough water to form a thick paste, applied directly to the sting site and left to dry. Bee venom is acidic, bicarbonate is alkaline. The women who used it didn't need to know the word pH, they knew the result. Number 26, vinegar and water rinse in a dilution of 1 part vinegar to 4 parts water, applied to sunburned or irritated skin on a cool cloth. Vinegar's mild acidity soothed the alkaline disruption that sunburn creates on the skin's surface, cooled the inflammation and reduced peeling. Margaret Holroyd, an allotment holder in Yorkshire cultivating a plot no larger than 2 parking spaces end to end, kept a bottle of malt vinegar in the shed alongside her elderflower and chamomile. She grew remedies and vegetables in the same beds. She never called it a remedy system. She called it keeping the garden useful. Number 25, elderflower cordial, made at home in concentrated form from freshly gathered flower heads steeped in boiling water, bottled and kept in the larder, drunk hot at the first sign of hay fever or early cold. The bioflavonoids in elderflower had demonstrable anti-inflammatory and antiviral properties that modern research has since confirmed. 4 million allotments were under active cultivation in Britain in 1948. The knowledge living in those plots was vast. Number 24, chamomile tea compress for irritated or infected eyes. A strong brew steeped for 10 minutes, cooled, a clean cloth soaked in it and held over closed eyes for 5 minutes. The anti-inflammatory compounds reduced redness without introducing anything harsher than warm water and dried flower heads to the eye. It smelled of summer. It worked every time, until the generation that knew why it worked was gone. Number 23, raw onion poultice for chest and throat congestion. A large onion sliced and gently warmed, wrapped in a cloth held against the throat or upper chest overnight. The volatile sulfur compounds released as the onion warmed acted as a natural expectorant, loosening mucus and easing the pressure of congestion. Women who used it did not apologize for the smell. They valued the result. Number 22, yarrow leaf, fresh or dried, pressed directly against a wound to halt minor bleeding. Yarrow's astringent compounds constricted blood vessels on contact. Jean Cartwright, a Women's Institute branch secretary in Lincolnshire, who coordinated remedy-sharing meetings attended by 60 women each year in the early 1950s, listed yarrow in her branch's circulated remedy notes alongside the standardized salt gargle her branch had agreed upon as the first-line response to any throat infection. 60 women in a village hall, no grant, no database, the most effective public health network in rural England. Number 21, ginger and honey tea for nausea, morning sickness and digestive upset. Fresh root ginger steeped in near-boiling water for 5 minutes, strained. A spoonful of honey stirred in whilst still warm. Gingerols in fresh ginger have since been clinically demonstrated to reduce nausea comparably to antiemetic medication. The women who kept a dried root in the larder through winter had 40 years of observation and a notebook. Then the companies arrived. Number 20, warm milk with honey and a pinch of nutmeg for sleeplessness in children. The tryptophan in warm milk is a precursor to melatonin. The honey stabilized blood sugar through the early hours. The nutmeg, in the smallest possible quantity, had mild sedative properties documented across centuries. No packaging, no measuring cap, no listed ingredients the parent could not pronounce. Number 19, lard or goose fat rubbed into the chest and covered with a warm flannel for persistent cough. The warmth retained by the fat kept airways marginally more open through the night. Women who rendered their own fat in autumn stored it in earthenware pots in the larder through winter. It had a particular smell, animal, clean, autumnal. It was not pleasant, it worked. Number 18, dock leaf, fresh, rubbed firmly against a nettle sting. It grew within 10 paces of nettles across every verge and hedgerow in Britain. Children were taught it before they could reliably tie their own shoes. It cost nothing. It vanished from common knowledge, not because it stopped working, but because the generation that needed to pass it on stopped assuming it needed saying. Number 17, the bran bath for eczema and itching skin. A muslin bag filled with plain oats hung beneath the running bath tap, so the water ran through it and turned milky. The bath then used as a soak for 15 minutes. Oats contain avenanthramides, anti-inflammatory compounds that soothe irritated skin on contact. Boots would later sell oat-based bath preparations at several pounds per packet. The knowledge was the same. The price was not. Number 16, sloe berry syrup, gathered in autumn after the first frost, boiled, strained through muslin, bottled, kept in the larder and taken by the spoonful through winter for coughs and sore throats. The ritual of making it connected the garden calendar to the health of the household across a single year. That connection was what the convenience product could not replicate and what its arrival quietly severed. Number 15, bicarbonate of soda dissolved in a small glass of warm water, used as a mouthwash for mouth ulcers, held against the sore for 30 seconds, repeated twice daily. It stung briefly on first contact, then it helped. And here is the second turn. Ruth Smedley, a domestic science teacher in Leeds, noted in 1956 that the girls arriving in her classroom that year had no prior home remedy knowledge. For the first time in her career, she was starting from nothing. The system had always looked effortless because it had always worked. Women who used it didn't explain it because it seemed obvious. The silence wasn't ignorance. It was the sound of knowledge so embedded in daily life that no one imagined it needed to be spoken aloud, until suddenly it did. Number 14, cooling damp cloth compress applied to the forehead and temples for headache, held for 20 minutes, refreshed when it warmed. Cold retained against the head longer than cloth alone eased the vascular pressure behind a tension headache without requiring anything beyond a bowl of cold water and a square of clean linen. Number 13, willow bark tea, dried bark steeped in near boiling water for 10 full minutes, strained and drunk for fever and headache. Salicin, the compound in willow bark, is the direct chemical precursor to aspirin. Women who brewed it were not practicing folk superstition. They were administering the original pharmaceutical. The last domestic science textbook chapter, known to include full instruction in poultice preparation and herbal steep timings, was removed in the curriculum revision that followed. The last girls taught this in school left the classroom in 1963. Their daughters would not be. Number 12, peppermint oil inhalation. 2 drops added to a bowl of near-boiling water, the head held over it beneath a towel for 8 minutes. The menthol triggered cold-sensitive receptors in the nasal passage, creating immediate perception of opened airways without the subsequent drowsiness that decongestant tablets produced. Number 11, raw potato slice applied cold to burns and scalds, a thick slice from the larder, laid against burned skin immediately, held until it warmed, replaced with another. In a kitchen where burns were a routine occupational hazard and a GP visit meant a bus journey and a morning's lost pay, this was a precise and immediate intervention. Number 10. Honey and thyme syrup for persistent dry cough. A jar of raw honey with fresh thyme sprigs pressed into it, sealed, left for 24 hours, the strained syrup taken by the teaspoon. Modern cough preparations list synthetic thymol derivatives among their ingredients. The women who made this syrup were working with the same chemistry, from plants on their kitchen windowsills at a cost measured in pence. Number 9. Cabbage leaf, refrigerated until cold, the central vein bruised flat. Applied to engorged or painful breasts as a postpartum remedy, held for 20 minutes and replaced when it warmed. This is now documented in midwifery literature. In 1950, it was simply what older women told younger women in the days after a birth, passed across a kitchen table with a cup of tea and the certainty of experience. Number 8. Saltwater nasal rinse, a weak saline solution administered via cupped palm to one nostril at a time, allowed to drain through the sinus passage. Modern nasal rinse devices sold in pharmacies operate on precisely the same principle at several pounds per device. The salt cost a penny. Number 7. Turmeric stirred into warm milk for joint pain and inflammatory conditions. A level teaspoon in a cup of full-fat milk, heated gently, drunk before bed. Curcumin's anti-inflammatory properties have since been extensively documented. By the 1950s, turmeric sat in some remedy notebooks alongside elderflower and yarrow without comment because it worked, and the notebook recorded what worked. And here is the final turn, and it is the darkest one. Beecham's, Boots, and Reckitt and Coleman had arrived. The marketing was targeted and brilliant. It did not argue that home remedies failed. It argued that they required effort. It framed precision as inconvenience and sold the idea that a modern woman should not be steeping bark or binding poultices. The product was not better. It was easier to reach for. Patricia Dunn, a young London mother in 1964, was the first woman in her family to own no remedy notebook. She kept Anodin in the bathroom and Benylin on the kitchen shelf. She did not know what either contained. Her grandmother had known exactly what she was doing and exactly why. Number 6. Apple cider vinegar diluted in warm water, 1 tablespoon each morning before eating, used as a daily digestive tonic. The acetic acid supported the stomach's acid environment and provided a mild antimicrobial effect in the upper digestive tract. Older women recalled it as simply part of the morning, as unremarkable as the day's first cup of tea. Number 5. Licorice root tea. Dried root steeped in boiling water for 15 minutes, strained and drunk for persistent cough and sore throat. Glycyrrhizin soothes inflamed mucous membranes and carries demonstrable antiviral properties. Market stallholders across northern England sold dried licorice root by the ounce into the early 1960s. The stalls contracted, the remedy contracted with them. Number 4. Lavender oil applied to the temples and inner wrists for anxiety, tension, headache, and sleeplessness. A drop on each fingertip worked gently into the skin. Linalool, the primary compound in lavender oil, has since been confirmed by multiple clinical studies to reduce cortisol levels and produce measurable anxiolytic effects. Women who grew lavender along their garden paths were not decorating, they were maintaining a pharmaceutical crop. Number 3. Calendula petal infusion. Pot marigold petals steeped in near-boiling water, cooled, strained, and applied as a wash for skin rashes, nappy rash, and minor wounds. Calendula grew in nearly every British cottage garden through the post-war period, orange-headed and unglamorous. The infusion took 8 minutes to make. It cost nothing. It has since been replaced by proprietary creams carrying calendula extract as a listed ingredient and a price of several pounds per tube. Number 2. Raw garlic. Half a clove, eaten or held in the cheek at the earliest sign of infection. Allicin, produced when garlic is crushed or bitten, is one of the most potent naturally occurring antimicrobial compounds yet identified. Women who kept a braid of garlic in the larder were not being superstitious. They were keeping the medicine cabinet stocked. Doris Hartley, Elsie's daughter, now a grandmother herself in the early 1970s, still had her mother's remedy notebook in the kitchen drawer. She watched her granddaughter reach for Calpol for a mild fever one afternoon and said nothing. The notebook sat unread. It did not take an empire to erase this knowledge. It took a decade, a product line, and a curriculum revision. And number one, the remedy notebook itself, the act of writing it, maintaining it, passing it between hands, reading it aloud to a daughter standing at a cooker on a Tuesday morning in January with a child coughing upstairs. Not a single preparation, not one compound. The notebook was the technology that carried all 34 remedies before it across time, from the woman who first proved that salt water worked to the granddaughter who might one day find it in a house clearance box. In 2024, in a terraced house not unlike Elsie Hartley's, a young woman does exactly that. She opens the notebook. She reads, 1 teaspoon of salt, half a pint of warm water, 30 seconds, 3 times daily. She recognizes it from somewhere she cannot name. She sets it on the kitchen shelf beside the row of pharmacy bottles lined up with their labels facing out, none opened. The kitchen light is on. The house is quiet. She knew why the salt worked.